I am so proud of Gospel Life Church. I really am. And that is primarily due to what? Rosie's Picnic. Each and every one of you had a part. And as I looked around, you may not have noticed, but I was seeing you serve. And I was just grateful. And as I said last week, it was the most enjoyable series of picnics that I've been a part of because of you guys taking your part and really allowed me to do what I love to do, and that's talk to people. So I just want to express gratitude. When I saw, Josie, where she's usually at the head of the table, when I saw Drew cooking up the barbecue, when I saw Ben taking photos, when I saw Star setting up tablecloths, when I saw everybody unloading the truck, loading the truck and unloading the truck, when I saw Jeff Swanson being able to lead us in prayer, and a multitude of others, it was just like, wow, this is an example. Teamwork makes the dream work. And someone else said it, the job I used to work with, dream work is teamwork. And really what we saw there was, by the way, was that a good vibe? And someone said to me, a young man said to me, yeah, my parent or whatever, not in the church thing. I'm like, you don't like church? This is church right here. Like, this is, you don't like this? I love this, right? The church is beautiful. It's like something we're attracted to when it's functioning the way it's supposed to function. It's an amazing thing. And I just look back and see all that's happening. We're interacting with our community. We're expressing generosity and love to our community. Everybody's doing their part. It was awesome. And that right there is an expression of how the church is supposed to be functioning all the time. And not just in throwing a barbecue or picnic, but in spiritual matters as well, and all the things that Jesus is calling us to. The church is awesome. I'm a big fan, in case you haven't noticed. And it's not something we have to do, it's something we get to do. And church only feels like something we have to do when it's maybe not functioning the way it should. But when each and every one of you is doing their part in serving, using the gifts that God has given you, it's an amazing place, an amazing thing to be a part of. It's something bigger than ourselves. And I want to argue this morning, you can't be a part of the mission of God, the primary mission of God, without being a part of the local church, because the local church is what God's doing in planet Earth right now. We are called the body of Christ. We are the visible, tangible expression of Jesus' presence in the world today. So what kind of presence are we reflecting out to our community? Is it something that's attractive, that people are attracted to? Because Jesus is attractive, right? He's amazing. Or is it something they're repulsed by? And if the church is functioning the way it should, both of those things in some sense should be happening. The people should be attracted by the beauty of Jesus' presence in the world. The only thing that should cause them to be repulsed is the offense of the cross, the offense of the gospel message itself. Jesus is to be the only stumbling block, not the way we present it, not the way we're hateful or critical. It's to be the gospel itself. So I just really want to express, again, gratitude to Gospel Life, each and every one of you for your part. And just look at Rosie's and all that was going on there as an example of how we're supposed to be functioning on a day-to-day basis, loving each other, discipling one another, praying for one another, challenging each other, exhorting one another, bearing one another's burdens, all those 30 one another statements we have in the New Testament that to collectively make up the community, the church, the fellowship. And you say, well, I don't necessarily need to be a part of a local church. What I look to is, and I'm going to tell my story in just a moment to illustrate the importance of the local church. And I want you to take that story. I'm not telling the story for my own glory at all or to glorify sin in any way. I really want you to hear part of that story just because it illustrates the necessity, importance of the local church. But 1 John 1:7 says, if we are in the light as he is in the light, what? What does that necessarily lead to? Cause is we're in the light. Jesus has shown us his light. Necessarily leads to what? We have fellowship one with another. I could translate that word fellowship, community, one with another. So you really can't say, hey, I'm in the light, I'm walking in the light, but hey, I don't need to be a part of a local church. I don't need to be a part of a gospel community. If we're going to take what 1 John 1:7 says literally. And we like to do that around here, right? We like the Bible. We're fans of this book. We say, hey, we're trying to live this out. Are we perfect in living this out? No, but praise God, grace and forgiveness are built into the new covenant Jesus established for us. Are they not? forgiveness is built into the fabric of what God Jesus provided for us on the cross. So being part of the local church is not about being perfect. The expression we're trying to give out to the community is not that, hey, we're perfect people. Never sin. No, what we're trying to show people is grace. We are a forgiven people. And we're fighting against sin, but praise God for His grace, because grace is not something we just needed in the past. It's something we're clinging to in the present. So sometimes I feel like church and people, I'm going to be a little bit humorous, forgive me, okay? Church is a little bit like a Jenga game. You guys familiar with Jenga? You try to pull out the little pieces and hope it doesn't collapse. And if it collapses on you, you lose the game. And what do we say? Jenga, right? Everything collapsed on you, not me. So we just really, with precision, try to pull out that piece. And sometimes I feel like, what happens when the trials of life come? We get overwhelmed. Life smacks us in the face, if you will. And the temptation is, we feel overwhelmed, so let's eject from everything that's extraneous, right? And let's go back and we like to isolate. Wow, life's way overwhelming, so I can't handle church right now. So we're going to wiggle out of the Jenga game, right, and hope nothing's affected. Is the church affected when you're not here, when you're not participating in the life of a local church? Is it affected? Are you important? Are you an image bearer with specific gifts given to you, called to exercise through the church and out into your community? Each and every one of you is important. Are you missed when you're gone? Absolutely. So don't treat church like it's a Jenga game. Like you can wiggle out. It's not going to collapse on you, right? It may collapse. I was meeting with someone this week, and they said, you know what? I know church is going through transition and such, but I want to commit to the local church because I don't want gospel life to fail because of my lack of involvement. I was like, well, I love to hear that. That's what I want to hear. And that's a beautiful expression. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story. Before I do, if you want to look at one of the key texts of what the church is called to be, 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, 4 through 12 specifically. And we're going to look at these first two verses, and I'm going to tell you a little story. 1 Peter chapter 2, we're going to look at verse 4 and 5. You are coming to Christ, who is the living cornerstone of God's temple. He was rejected by people, but He was chosen by God for great honor. And you are living stones that God is building into His spiritual temple. What's more, you are His holy priests. Through the mediation of Jesus Christ, you offer spiritual sacrifices that please God. So, my point here right now is, together we are collectively a spiritual temple. First century religion, pagans, they would come across Christians and learning what Christianity is. They would say, so, where's your temple? Where's your temple at? If you're a new religion, Christianity, where's your temple? We are the temple. We, the people, together form a temple. Where's your sacrifices at? Jesus was our sacrifice. Once for all. And now we, as an expression of that, sacrifice for others the way He did for us. So we together form this building. This church building is not a holy place. That's why I prefer, and you want to do differently, that's fine. I prefer to call this an auditorium, not a sanctuary. Just to be really careful in our language, because together, the Christians in the body of Christ, we are the temple. We are indwelt by the Holy Spirit, the way the Holy Spirit dwelled in the temple, the glorious presence, the Shekinah glory filled Old Testament temple. We together have that indwelling presence, the Holy Spirit. And we are to carry that with us out into the world to shine the light. We are a city on a hill whose light should not be hidden under a bushel of basket. So, are you a part of a local church? Are you part of the temple? Are you exercising your gifts in the temple? Are you being challenged? Are you being inspired? Are you being given hope through your local church? So, when I was, I'm a pastor's kid. I'm a missionary kid too. I grew up. I first placed my trust, and I can remember this very vividly, in Jesus when I was 4, baptized when I was 5. And I remember it. I can tell you all about it. And that's primarily because my dad had us involved in the local church. I heard the sermon. I remember this sermon vividly when I was 4, and I went home and I was convicted, and I knew what the fear of God was, and I knew that God's judgment rested on me. that I had not experienced His grace, I had not experienced forgiveness. And I knew that if I were to die right then, God would sentence me to hell. That was very real to me. And so I remember waking my dad up, and he was sharing the gospel with me and told me about God's grace and what Jesus did for me on the cross to save me from all that, to save me from the wrath of God. And I was very happy to hear that good news. Fast forward, when I was 10 years old, we were living in a little city, my family, that you may have passed by on the freeway on the 75 going south, Bowling Green, Ohio. This is the first little town you'll come to when you're traveling south on 75 past Toledo. You guys heard Bowling Green? Right? It's kind of a one-exit town. Well, it's Bowling Green State University's there. There's 26,000 people at the time. And my dad, we left South Carolina, where my dad was an assistant pastor, to come up to Bowling Green, Ohio, where my dad was going to be the lead pastor. And I think we moved there when I was like 7. And my dad was doing a phenomenal job. And my dad would take me, and I knew this because my dad would take me with him everywhere he was going. And my dad knocked on every door in that little town 1.5 times in the 3 years we were there. And if my dad wasn't out speaking, ministering to people, he was in his office studying in his basement. And I loved being a part of what my dad was doing. I always got to go with him and observe and see all these conversations. And, the church, when we arrived, had 40 people. And soon it had over 100. He was in the middle of a building program. A businessman had donated some money. They were in the middle of remodeling a building, an old restaurant, and actually had some property, and they were transporting it over. Everything's going really well. Get a knock at the door one day, 10 years old. I remember opening the door along with my little sister, my big sister, actually. She was little at the time. There stood the man who really wasn't a deacon, but he was acting like a deacon, and along with many of the men of the church, probably like 5 or 6 men of the church. And they say, "Can we speak to your father?" And I said, and so I went and got my dad, and they were there that morning to ask my dad to step down from his position. And you think, well, why? They didn't like, boil it down, I've given this a lot of thought, they didn't like change. They were very comfortable at 40 people. Here, people are getting baptized, people saved, the message is going out, we're growing, we're in the middle of a building program, and some benefits that certain people in the church were receiving that were not on the table were starting to be challenged and threatened. And so they very much wanted to go back to the way it was. My dad called for counsel. He did not receive good counsel. He said, you know what? It must be the pastor's fault. If you're being asked to leave your pastorate, it must be your fault. It couldn't possibly be that you're fighting against sin and giving out the gospel and you're under attack from the enemy. No. So we went back to South Carolina, where we were from. My family was not well received because, again, in some sense, we were blackballed because it was like, hey, if you're asked to leave your pastorate, it must be your fault. That's about as far as their thinking process took them. So my dad was very hurt by this, and so we went back to California, where my mom and dad are from, trying to regroup. By the way, when we moved up to Detroit, started seminary, of course I wanted to visit Bowling Green, right? That was, 7 years ago? So we traveled to Bowling Green. I'm looking for the church that existed. It was Wood County Baptist Church. And I looked it up on Google Maps, and so I'm driving to find this church. It's not in the city. It's out in the outskirts of the city. So I'm driving. Now I'm on a dirt road. I'm driving. Oh, here's this little tiny building, smaller than this one room here, 1 story, in the middle of a cornfield. Literally, the parking lot was flanked on all sides by a cornfield, right? You had to really want to get to this church building to get to this church. And, my dad came and visited for my ordination, and I said, Dad, let's go visit Bowling Green. He's like, no, I don't want to visit their son. But you know what? My dad and my mom went with me down there to Bowling Green. And my dad's a really outgoing person, so we're passing by this man's house who used to be a big part of our church. And, my dad at first said he didn't want to go to Bowling Green. I'm driving by, and he's like, stop the car, son. I stop the car, and he runs out, and he knocks on this door of this man. It's like, Dad, what are you doing? He's so outgoing. He's so extroverted. He just has to talk to this guy. And so we ended up having this conversation with this guy, and one of the things I found out was his son, who I was best friends with at the time, had recently committed suicide. And I remember the statement that this man made. He says, yeah, we're still about 40 people, and we're kind of growing the slow way. I'm like, are you growing in reverse? I mean, it's been like 20 years, right? And very content for that, okay? So that's kind of a side note. Change is good, right? It's uncomfortable, but do we need change? Do we want to stay where we're at now? I'm happy where we're at now, but we need to keep moving, right? So, as a result of that, my dad found himself, we're in California, cost of living is a little bit more, and he's trying to put food on the table. He's trying to provide for us. He's reeling because he'd given his life to the ministry, missionary, got a Bible degree, missionary, assistant pastor. He'd given everything to this, and now he's like, whoa, what's going on? So he's just trying to put food on the table. The result is I didn't have a lot of, like I did all growing up when I was by my dad's side, I did not have a lot of interaction with my father. He was working long hours. First job, major job he had, you know what it was? Waterbed gallery. He goes from being a pastor to selling waterbeds. You don't think that's humbling? But what I love about my dad is he was a good provider. And he didn't just sit on the couch and do nothing and feel sorry for himself. Yeah, he was confused and trying to look for God's leadership, but he was a good provider for our family. But the result is I didn't have a lot of interaction with him. And so I found myself in the wrong crowd. And we kept looking for a good local church. And at times we would travel 40 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour to get to a good local church. And something would happen. And the way we were raised is like there's only one kind of church that's good and all others are bad, right? And to find that one kind of church in Southern California was very challenging. So at times, we weren't going to church very much. And that's the way my dad was taught. He's a first-generation Christian. He was taking the leadership that was given to him. And so at times, we would find we're not very... So what? I was still looking and searching for a gospel community. But I didn't know it, so I settled for any community that would do. Started working at a little restaurant, and I got involved with college kids, which I appreciated much better than the high school kids, because all I did get at high school was ridicule. I didn't understand it, but college kids seemed to me I could connect with. Well, they got me into trouble. And so here I find myself, 23 years old, completely far away from God. In fact, I hadn't seen my family at that point. I moved out at 17, and I hadn't seen my family since then. And I was in a bad way, and I take it back to the fact that I was not a part of a local church getting that encouragement, because up until that point, we'd always been a part of one. And so I found myself in a lot of bad habits, and it happened one week, in a matter of a couple weeks actually, that age 23, I had an apartment in Los Angeles. I lost my apartment because I couldn't pay the rent. Because my job, where I worked, I did some computer graphic work, and it had just been sold to another company, and they laid everybody off. And then at the same time, I lost my car because I got it impounded by LAPD because I couldn't pay my registration. I couldn't pay insurance because I lost my job. So I lost my job, my apartment, and my car all in a matter of a couple weeks. And to that point, like, I'm good. I'm self-set. I don't need anybody. I'm self-sustaining. And it was at that point God worked in my life to call up to look for see where my family was. And I looked in the yellow pages to try to find out where my family was, and I came across my sister has an unusual name. Her name is Charmaine. And I found Charmaine. That's got to be her. How many Charmaines are there, right? And because my parents weren't in the phone book, well, I called her up and actually was reunited with my sister and brother, but I could not face my parents. My dad called up to my sister's apartment one day, and I picked up the phone accident, and just to hear the whisper of his voice sent me immediately into tears. Well, he called back a few weeks later, and I was actually talked to him, and I was definitely not living for Jesus at the time. And my dad embraced me and over the phone and loved on me and invited me to come, and he had gone back to South Carolina for the time. And I flew back to South Carolina to spend the summer with my parents after not having seen them for years. Second day I was there, I got a haircut, right? And my dad took me to the store and bought me a suit and tie because we were going back to church, son. And the church that he was a part of, which he had been a pastor at previously, they all wore suit and ties, so he bought me one. I couldn't afford it. And so I had an amazing summer with my folks, reunited. I felt rejuvenated. And all the things from my past, that I had been taught were being reintroduced into my life. And so I was on fire. I felt forgiven. I felt refreshed. I felt grounded. I felt secure. I'm like, okay, this is what I have been missing. So I went back to California after the summer's over, and what did I start doing? I started witnessing to my friends, telling them about Jesus, because they knew me as this other person. And I started witnessing to them, and I would go to their place, and I would start, talking about what was going on, and they would say, hey, Timothy, come with us to this party. I'm like, no, man, I don't do that anymore, right? But over time, I wasn't part of a local church. I was on solo mission. Now, I was full of zeal, but I was alone. And over time, they kept inviting me. I said, well, I'll just go to the party because I'll have more people to share Jesus with, right? Soon I found myself doing the exact same things I used to do. Now, was I feeling guilt and shame at that time? Did I feel like I had betrayed Jesus? And you know what? It didn't seem like anybody noticed. Why? No one missed me. Parents didn't know what I was doing. They're back in South Carolina, although they were moving back to California at some point. No one missed me. The only community I had was this community of people that liked to party. Not that they were all losers and stuff. They were nice people. But I found myself being more influenced by them having more of an influence on me than I was having an influence on them. And a result of that, in my mind, when I introspect in my private time, I was feeling guilt and shame, like I knew I wasn't living out my faith. Well, I was working computer graphics again at the time, and I was like, I hate computer graphics. You sit behind a computer all day long. Right? I don't want to do computer graphics. I was making really good money, so it's like, I'll take a vacation. So I took a vacation, and I told you a little bit about that vacation where someone almost drowned a few weeks back. So I met some people when I was on vacation, and they invited me to come visit them. So again, I'm wandering aimlessly in life. 23, right? 23 years old. I don't have a mission anymore because I've succumbed to the environment around me. I'm not a part of the local church. Did I mention that? So I go and visit my newfound friends in New York City. And I missed my plane to come back home over New Year's. And so they said, stay a little longer, and why don't you go check out this line of work while you're here waiting for your plane? So I went and checked out this particular line of work. And it's like, hey, I can make money at this, and I don't have to go back to computer graphics. This is good. So I stayed in New York. And guess what? More trouble. Bad influences. And there's my wife and I visited New York City a few years back, and we visited a church that we greatly appreciate, Redeemer Presbyterian. The pastor of that church has a very similar name to mine. And if I'd known about that local church when I was there in New York City, I think I would still be living in New York City. But I didn't know anything about local churches, right? Again, I was taught that only this one little expression of a local church is permissible and the right one. Here I go off to another country, Italy, and God starts working in my life again. The first night I arrived in Italy, a good friend who had been over there, who's established in this line of work, who's very successful, invited me to a birthday party. And at 3 a.m., this guy, his name is Frederick, says, hey, we're going to study the Bible, guys. I'm like, we're at a birthday party. People have been drinking a little bit. We're celebrating. 3 a.m., this guy says, we're going to study the Bible, guys. And because it was Frederick, we all said, okay. And we all sat down in a circle, and we didn't know a lot about the Bible. We didn't know how to study the Bible. But we're just reading the Bible together because that's all we knew how to do. And the sun comes up, and we were studying the Bible, so we catch a train home. And I'm like, that was awesome. And so, guess what? Thanks to my friend Frederick, we start visiting local churches around Italy. And I was like, refreshed again. These people are Christians. Look what they're talking about. Oh my, this is what I've been missing. And so what happens is, after that time I spent there in Italy, I was like, I want to go back and get involved in the local church. A lot of people go to Italy, get into a lot of trouble. I went to Italy and got right with God. And I was like, the local church. And so I go back home, and again, you're going to think, stupid Timothy, I did not get involved in the local church. I couldn't find one, over time, it stopped being important to me again, even in spite of what God had done in my life. And so what happens is, next thing you know, I find myself right back where I was. Is that frustrating? So what happens? go back to New York again. And Halloween night, I'm sitting at a sushi restaurant filled with a bunch of people, successful people, quote unquote, and the guy who's paying for the whole meal turns to me in front of everybody and says, "Timothy, so you're a Christian, tell us why." I'm like, whoa, how do you know I'm a Christian? I've been an undercover Christian for so long. How do you know I'm a Christian? And I was called out. And these are, successful industry people, kind of the people that I'm supposed to look up to try to get work from, and these prestigious clients. And now he wants me to talk about my faith in front of them. I was hugely embarrassed. Hugely embarrassed. Did I want to talk about that? I wanted out of that conversation pronto. And you know what I did? I got under strong conviction. And the one thing I carried around me from place to place as I traveled was my dad's King James Bible, wide margin Cambridge edition. And I went home to my apartment in Brooklyn, and I opened up that thing, and I started reading it. And here, we're in New York City, this is 99, and here we know Y2K is coming, right? You guys remember Y2K? So all I knew is, because there's all this hype at Y2K, the millennium 2000's coming, like, the world's going to shut down. You remember that? No, you don't want to remember it. And I was like, I do not want to be in New York City when this goes down, right? They said that the planes are going to stop running, we're going to be sleeping in the subways, it's going to be crazy. And so, flew back home, and God had worked in my life such that all I knew was I couldn't this is a 7-year period I just talked about. 7 years away from I had a little bit of light in the middle of that, a 4.5 year period, then a 3-year period, and all I knew was I couldn't keep going back to the way I was. And so I did something very humbling at that time. I moved back in with my parents. You guys know what that's like? Had to move back in with your parents? I took my phone book and I threw it in the closet. I said, I can't be calling anybody because I'm too weak right now. I cannot have these outside influences because obviously, to look back at the 7 years, I'm not strong enough to take it. Guess what my dad did? Did what he always does. He brought me to the local church. I started getting stronger again. And then a couple of friends who God had used me to share the gospel with, who I'd seen a lot of change in their life, they said, "Oh, we're going to a tiny Bible college." I'm like, "What?" "Yeah, it's a tiny little Bible college in Pomona, California. It only has 26 day students." I'm like, "Why would you do this?" That's part of me was saying that, because I was trying to figure out, where to go, making money. And so I said, you know what? Shoot, I will enroll in this little Bible college. Let's find out more about Jesus. All right, you're going to do it? I'll do it too. And guess what I discovered at that little Bible college? Something called theology. And I'm like, whoa, I did not know Christianity was thought through and had intelligence behind it and was really deep and, sophisticated and intelligent. I realized I don't really know much about the Bible. I have a Sunday school basic understanding. I need to get in the Word and figure this thing out. I thought I knew the Word, but I really was discovering I don't know the Word. Not like these guys know it. And guess what? A pastor comes to the little Bible college and says, "You know what? I'm looking for help." And guess what he wanted help doing? He wanted help on Saturdays to knock on doors, to invite the kids, to remind the kids the bus is coming tomorrow to pick them up for church. And this is out in the middle of nowhere, out in the desert, right? In a place that is infested with methamphetamine. And so I was like, I felt convicted. I'm like, talked to my friends. I was like, "Hey, the pastor asked for help. Are we going to help him?" And I'm like, "Timothy, you're the one talking about it. You must be the one." We've moved on. So why are you're still thinking about that call for help? And so I went and called for that help. Here's what I discovered. When I driving out there to that desert place, I would be like, why did I sign up for this? I'm going to be knocking on doors out in the middle of, I would knock on doors and they'd sometimes be invited in. I'd find diapers stacked up in the corner of these houses, like this high. Trash stacked up, right? This is the kind of places we were in. People would be selling drugs from their apartment carports. Right? And what I would do is I would go up to these guys and you know what? Might as well invite them too. Started giving the gospel to guys selling drugs out of their trunks in their carport. And what I would find is when I would drive home back to Huntington Beach after that long day out there, I was like, that was like the best day I ever had. That was awesome. And sure enough, the next Saturday I'd be doing it again. I'm like, why did I sign up for this? Sure enough, I'd be driving home. I'd be calling whoever I could call, my dad, and say, "Dad, I just had the most amazing day." You wouldn't believe what happened, right? And not a lot of people came to church as a result of me knocking on doors, by the way. But what I did find was that when I was faithful and obedient to knock on doors, Jesus would bring people. And when I didn't knock on doors, he didn't bring people. So guess who got the glory? He says, you're going to be obedient, Timothy? We're going to bring people to church, but not because you did anything, but because I'm doing something. So that was awesome. And so I say all that to say, I have a heart for young people because of what happened when I was young. I don't want that to happen to other young people, do I? I want to warn them. 7 years of I could say, stupidity, wandering from God. I want to take all those lessons from those 7 years, package it up, and say, here, don't go that way. Take all the wisdom, took all this heartache for me to get, and let me just give it to you in a matter of moments. And please heed this warning. So I have a heart for young people, and I also have a heart for the local church because of my testimony, what God did in my life. I believe the local church is an important thing. And what happens when we get the world smacks us in the face? We have a tendency to isolate. And that's what I was doing. And I feel like, you know what? Maybe God said, you know what, Timothy, I'm going to let you wander the wilderness for 7 years. That way, when I finally lead you into becoming a pastor, people won't say you're too young. But I still get you're too young. But I could have been doing what I'm doing 7 years previous. And I am the prodigal son. I wasted all that time. Now, thankfully, God He redeemed all that time, and I learned a lot of lessons the hard way because of that. But I didn't have, why couldn't I just stay focused, involved in my local church and not have to experience all that heartache and loneliness and emptiness and lack of purpose and lack of meaning? I'm a big fan of a local church. It's not something I have to do, it's something I get to do, and I realize that it's something hugely important that I'm a part of. It's important that I'm here, it's important that you're here, and that we're building each other up. So the local church, the big theme I want you to see this morning is in my testimony. I could go into more details about a lot of heartache, but the local church made all the difference for me. Me having a community that was counting on me to be there, counting on me to live out my faith, encouraging me, inspiring me, giving me hope, has made all the difference in my life. And I was like, you know what? I want to be a part of the local church. In fact, I want to serve in the local church because I want the accountability. I want the commitment because I don't want to wander away from God ever again like I did before. I want to have people to be depending on me to be at church so that I can't wander away. I want that accountability. I want that responsibility. And so I was willing to relinquish my freedom and my liberty as a Christian to enter into responsibility and commitment because I knew it was important for me not to wander away from Jesus again and experience more aimless wandering. And the result is, through God's grace, I'm here before you today. And it's a joy. Believe me, what I get to do in the local church and serving with you guys is far more satisfying, brings far more joy to me and my wife than anything I've ever been a part of. And I said to the Lord, when I was in Bible college, I said, Lord, I will go in the middle of nowhere and serve you no matter what. I just want to be a part of what you're doing. I just want to serve you. And I love being a part of this. It may not seem like it sometimes, especially when I'm battling with insurance companies, but I love being a part of the local church, and it's hugely important. So I want to. Some of you think, because of things that have been said, and I don't blame you, that we're no longer doing membership at Gospel Life. We're still doing membership, and soon, very soon, even during our worship services at the end, we're going to be calling and voting in members. There's actually a list of people that need to be voted in. And I want to do that, not just at the family meetings, I want to do that here as we gather to worship, because I want us to see more people will be able to see, more witnesses will be able to see who is actually committing to the local church. And as the pastor, an under shepherd to the real pastor, Jesus Christ, I want to know, one of the reasons why I want members and membership enacted in our churches, I want to know who I'm responsible for. Do you realize I'm going to give an account for the souls at this church? So I want to know, it needs to be clear to me, who am I accountable for? Now, very often I want to go after people and help people that are not just members, right? But Galatians 6:10 says, do good unto all men, especially those of the household of faith. I want to know who. So there's this idea in theology, and how do you define the church? Well, there's the universal, invisible church, and there's also the local, visible church. Now, what is the universal church? The universal, invisible church is everybody who has been gathered into the church for all time. This includes people in the Old Testament. People in the Old Testament were saved, if you will, on credit based on what Jesus would do in the future. The blood of bulls and goats never took away sin. So they were offering sacrifices, and they were called out people of God because God the Father knew in the future His Son would actually pay the price for their sin, welcoming them into the family of God, the people of God. So the universal church is everybody who's been called out of the world into the people of God. Now, by the way, when we're called out of the world, we're called to go back into it as light bearers. We don't just call out of the world to stay out, right? Let's isolate. We're called to go back into it. But the local visible church, what is that about? Well, the way I love to define the church is Jesus of necessity forms a gospel community that goes on mission. That's a simple definition, those three components. If you get Jesus, you're going to be involved in a gospel community. Why? Because if you walk in the light, as He's in the light, you're going to have fellowship one with another. It's also going to lead you on mission to serve, because Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give His life a ransom for many, right? So Jesus forms a gospel community that goes on mission. But if I wanted to expand the definition just a little bit, what are the components? Here's the components to the local church. Fellowship. Fellowship. Or I could say community. Now, what does that look like? The easiest way to say is, like I said earlier, it's the 30 one another statements in the New Testament. As I said, love one another, pray for one another, confess your sins to one another, right? There's 30 of those. Fellowship. Then there's the Word. The preaching of the Word results in evangelism and discipleship. That's 2. So fellowship, the Word. The sacraments, or we could call those ordinances, or we could call those ceremonies, and that's baptism and the Lord's Supper. And finally, there's church government. And that's biblically qualified elders, and church discipline. We could put in that category. So if you extract any of those, do you have a local church that's described in the New Testament? This is kind of a learning thing right now. If you extract one of those, and let's say my expression of my faith, which again did not work for me, sitting in my hotel room watching a televangelist on Trinity Broadcast Network, say, is that being part of a local church? Now you can say, well, I'm part of the Universal Invisible Church in my hotel room watching this televangelist. And that to me is like saying, yeah, I married my wife, but no, we don't live together. She's down in South Carolina. Why do you ask? I'm sure she's fine, right? She doesn't need me to love her. Do I need to bring her flowers? She's fine. Will my wife be happy with that? So it's like, okay, I'm a part of the universal invisible, but hey, I don't need to be part of the local visible. That's not going to fly in marriage. Let's say you do that for your job. Yeah, I have a job so-and-so, but you never show up. That would be awesome. No responsibility. No paycheck. So let's say we have a home Bible study. Is that a local church? The New Testament refers to churches that meet in homes. What? It could be the start. So just a kind of a learning thing. If those are if fellowship, a home Bible study has fellowship, does it not? Yes. It has the Word, right? If you haven't studying the Word, that's awesome. Does a home Bible study practice baptism and the Lord's Supper? Well, maybe they do. Maybe they have a pool in the backyard and they're actually going off and witnessing to people and they baptize in the back. Great. Maybe they practice the Lord's Supper. That's possible. Church government. Do they have biblically qualified elders and pastors? If they do, they're a church. If they don't, they're not. Why do we need pastors and church government? It's kind of a side point. Because why? There's going to be times in life when you battle with sin and you're going to need somebody to hold you accountable. And we're saying, hey, people that want to be involved in local churches like I needed to are saying, hey, sin is a serious thing. We are to be fighting against sin. And you know what? Instead of looking away from my sin, I'm going to face my sin head on, face to face. I'm going to do battle against it, and I want other people to help me. And that's what I needed. I needed wisdom, I needed counsel, I needed to be called out. When I had pastors looking out for me, it made all the difference in my life. So a home Bible study can or cannot be a church. Depends if they have all those components. So let me answer this question. Where do we draw the line between who can be a member and who cannot? Where do we draw that line? We already said there's no perfect people, right? Any perfect people in here? No perfect people. It's only one perfect, and that's who? the God-man, Jesus Christ, right? So it's not about being perfect. It's about displaying grace. So we are the people, the called out people of God, and in order to answer this question, we got to look at what is our big purpose. Our purpose is to reflect out to the community, to the world, what God is like, as expressed through the person of Jesus Christ. He's generous, He's merciful, He's gracious, He's all about justice, He's all about truth, He's forgiving, right? Living those things out, we show we are God's presence in the world today. So, this has happened to me where the more you find out about a church that you respected, the more dirt you find out. Like on the surface, it looks really good, like they're pursuing Jesus, but then come to find out something silly. I've heard about this. Is, the pastor's embezzling money to go on vacations to Bahamas. Well, that's probably not good, right? Like the closer you look behind the curtain, you find out, it's just a money-making venture. That's just one example, okay? Does that happen? Sadly, it does. Our church should be that the closer you look to the leadership and the members of the church, the more you find Jesus, not the less, right? So, yes. So, it's like drawing a line in the sand saying, hey, members are the ones, hey, we're taking sin seriously. The clear commands is we may struggle, we are doing battle. The temptation is to say, God winks at my personal sin, and he takes seriously everybody else's sin, right? God winks at mine, though. I don't have to address that. Me and God are buddies, we're homies. He's just kind of cool with that, right? But God, we're told in Scripture, He doesn't show any partiality, does He? He doesn't say, the rich people are more important than the poor people. Or the quote-unquote religious people are more important than the non-religious people. He looks without partiality. So the idea is, the church is, who do we accept into membership? Those who are willing to be the called out people of God, on mission, fighting against sin, to represent God to the world. Who are serious about that. It's very easy. I knocked on a lot of doors in that desert place I told you about. And most of the people that answered the door, maybe they had a Budweiser in one hand and a cigarette in the other, right? And not that there's anything wrong with Budweiser, except for the fact it's not, watered down, right? Japanese. Now it's a Japanese company, I hear. But at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they say, I'm a Christian. You know what I like to do when people say, I'm a Christian, and I go to church? I'm sorry. You know what I like to do? Thank you. You know what I like to do? And this is my little litmus test. What's your name of your pastor? You'd be surprised how often, I have no idea who the name of my pastor is. What's the name of your church? Oh my goodness, you caught me. You know what I mean? So the idea is, no church is perfect, by the way. If you go into a local church and you're saying, what can the church do for me? You're probably going to find some problems. But if you go into a local church and you see problems, you're like, opportunity. I can serve. The problems, by the way, I'm going to say this, make this bold statement, that where you see problems in the local church is where God is calling you to serve. So if you're on mission with Jesus and say, Jesus was a servant, I want to be a servant, when you go into a local church and you see some problems, that's opportunity. Hey, that's where I can get plugged in. Have you ever been a part of a bigger church or where you go in and you got to wait in line behind 6 other PhDs to teach kindergarten, Sunday school? I got to have a PhD to teach kindergarten, Sunday school? Well, we have a host of PhDs here because we're in a college university town, and can I do something? When you see problems, when you see gaps, hey, rejoice. There's opportunity. Get plugged in, right? And people are going to start counting on you, and they're going to start respecting you like, wow, this is a person who's on mission. This is a person who's actually committed. This is a person, hey, I can follow their example. And guess what? When you do that, other people are encouraged. For instance, do you know what it takes for the worship team throughout the week? Did they just come up here on Sunday morning? No, they're practicing. They're looking at the music. Are we all blessed by that? Are we grateful for that? Who's getting paid on that worship team? Nobody. Amen. Let's grow so we can pay that man. I'd love to have certain people in this church working full time. I would say, wow, I would love to pay certain people because, you know, I said, if I paid you money, you would do more of what you're already doing. I would love that. I would love you to work 40 hours a week doing what you already do in the cracks and crevices of your week when you find time. So, yes, we are implementing worship. It's an expression, hey, I want to be committed to this local church. I want people to shepherd me. I want people to look out for me. I want to serve. I want to be a blessing. I want to be a part of something bigger than myself. It's not like, hey, why are they trying to put these shackles on me and force me into this thing? No, it's not we have to. It's we get to. And if we take sin seriously, we say, I want people to have my back. I want a pastoral leadership that's going to say, you know what, if I start to wander from Jesus, wander from grace, I want someone to go after me. That's really what I needed in my life. And I want to commit to others. And really, when you read the membership application in the church covenant, what you're seeing there in large part is what the leaders of the church commit to you. We're committing to you. It's not like, hey, what can you guys do for us? How can you serve us, right? You got some money, you got some time, you got some talent. What can you do? No, it's in large part, how can we serve you? Who are we to commit our resources to? So we want to be a blessing to you. So in my life, having my testimony, being a part of local church was so important. It wasn't just a, do I like the pastor or not? If I like the pastor, I want to be part of this church. If I don't like the pastor, go to another church down the street. It was like, please let me be a part of your church. Believe me, I need it. You'll let me be a part? Do you know my past? My brother shared his testimony. He had a similar testimony to mine, but different. And he actually had the audacity to share his testimony in a local church that I was going to at the time. And guess what? After he shared his testimony, it was like this with my brother. No, I don't know if you're going to be able to serve here. You've been a sinner, a bad sinner, a bad sinner. Should that be the kind of place our local church is? Jesus came to save what? Came to save who? Sinners! Right, there's a sign in our lobby that says we love sinners. Why? Because Jesus loves sinners. And if we love sinners, we speak the truth in love. We take people from where they are to where they need to be, to where they want to be, to where Jesus has called them to be. That's what we do. We find people where they are and take them to where Jesus has called them to be. So Jesus, we're told in Acts 20:28, Jesus purchased the church with his own blood. How have you, anybody here been so passionate about something you gave your life for it? Now, some of us give our lives for something, right? In our careers. But Jesus laid down his life physically because that's how passionate he is about the called out people of God, the church. If he's that passionate, can we really be like Jesus without also serving the local church is my question. And it's for knowing full well that it's our benefit. So I want to close this way. I said when life has a tendency to smack us in the face, we have a tendency to want to isolate. But Hebrews 10:24-25 says, let us not neglect our meeting together. He says, do not neglect the assembling of yourselves together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. So, what if I asked you this morning, who's struggling? I said a few weeks ago that we could reduce all of our struggles and trials in life to 3 categories. Either health and medical, either relational, or money or financial. Some of you are struggling with all 3 of those. So if I asked you to stand, and I won't call you out this morning, in the future I might. If I asked you to stand and say, hey, if you're struggling with if you yourself are struggling with a medical or health issue or a close loved one of you, stand up. Do you think there'd be people standing up in this room? If I say, you're struggling with a relational problem, whether your marriage or a son or daughter or a very close friend, there's a struggle or a battle right now in your family that it's threatening to tear you apart, would there be some people standing up in this room? If I said to you, if there's some of you that are struggling financially, you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you don't know how you can put food on the table, you don't know, or maybe there's a close relative of yours that's, the same, they're calling, asking you for money all the time, would there be some people in this room that stand up? Are there some people in this room today that are feeling somewhat overwhelmed by life? So what happens when we come in here in the morning and we gather? Not that the church is exclusively this gathering, this is an event. This is not the church, this is an event the church does. Because if the church is defined by this event, that means this church ceases to exist when we scatter. It only exists when we gather. So, we come in here, and what happens? This worship team, calls us to sing these particular songs. And this worship event is going on this certain track. And we've been beat down by life and going distracted and all these things, but yet we know when we get here in the morning, we're going to be worshiping God together. In spite of all those other things, these lyrics are going to be put before us, and it's going to direct our minds back to who Jesus is and and do you experience joy when you sing and worship to God? It's like a hospital. And joy, right, and inspiration and a recalibration is happening. And we're like, all these other distractions of the world I'm battling, but hey, you should leave here refreshed. You should leave here challenged. You should leave here inspired, but you should also leave refreshed. Do you need that? How about we just do hellfire and brimstone? Everybody goes down, leaves here feeling discouraged, beat down, guilt, shame. No good news. Now, fire and brimstone have a place in the gospel message, right? That sets the context. But we also, according to Hebrews 10:25, we're supposed to gather together to encourage one another. And we come in here, we're so focused on our own problems because we've been struggling throughout the week. But it's always helpful when we start to help bear one another's burdens, our own burdens seem less weighty. That's how it works. The Holy Spirit works that way. So keep in mind, if you're in here this morning, you have problems, guess what? You're not alone. There may be a person right next to you that also has problems and struggles. Guess what? They need your encouragement. And if you don't show up for the assembly, the worship, the event, guess what? They may go home not having been encouraged on a one-to-one, face-to-face. Is your being here important? Absolutely, yes, it is. And they'll leave here encouraged, and guess what? You'll leave here encouraged. Because guess what? When you align yourself with the Spirit's work, He pours out His joy on you. And you get to rejoice. And like, my problems? Yeah. They don't seem as bad. They don't seem as weighty. And by the way, I got encouraged. And someone prayed for me. And someone put their arm around me. And someone cares about what I'm going through. And someone has encouraged me, and they're calling me back to what Jesus called us to do. So I don't waste my life. The primary thing that brings God glory in this age is the local church. That's what Jesus gave His life for. And if He cares about it, so should we. So I have some membership applications on the back table. I want to know who's committed. There's several members. We have members here, and there's a lot of people who are committed. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is so I can place this sermon on the internet, so we can have more people watch it, but also so we can say, hey, membership is still in existence. Let us know if you want to commit to the local church and be on mission with us. And when you're a member, you're going to help vote in other members. And those are the ones that I'm accountable for. And I want to know. I want to draw a line in the sand. Are you with us? Because the best days for gospel life are in the future. And we want to call people to that mission. And we want gospel life to be a beautiful expression of the body and the presence of Jesus Christ in this place. So be a part of it. It's awesome. I needed it, and I believe everyone else does as well. All right, so I want to call